Welcome to Football Today Team Profiles and Projections. And today we are looking at the Las Vegas Raiders, who came in our power rankings at 27th after an 8-9 season. Tumultuous year last year for them, right? They fired Josh McDaniel mid-season. They, Antonio Pierce is the interim coach, and now he has, he is the no interim tag. He is the head coach, his first full season as the Raiders head coach. Last year, they were 23rd in scoring, ninth on offense, ninth in scoring on defense, which we're going to talk about this defense because I like this defense, but I'm worried that there's too much reliance on it with this team. Luke Getsy comes over as the offensive coordinator after being fired by the Bears, and then was the Packers QB coach, passing game coordinator before that. And then Patrick Graham is in year 3 after being the Giants defensive coordinator for 2 seasons and 1 year in Miami. So they were 3-5 under Josh McDaniels. And Antonio Pierce finishes the season 5-4. And the defense showed out in those games. Like, there's no denying that. But if there's any team that is in line for regression, it's this Raiders, because I think this defense is going to be good, but I don't know if they can repeat what they did last year. And the offense, to me, is just, it's going to be bad. And they don't have depth at basically any positions, Justin. And when you go back and see what they did, that Patrick Mahomes game on December 25th was huge. That was a great win, right? The way that what things they're able to do defensively. But Aiden O'Connell threw for 62 yards in that game. He had 9 completions on the second drive of the game that ended in a field goal. Let me ask you, over under 5 completions for the rest of that game, the next 3 quarters after that drive.
Oh, under. It was like a storyline that game.
He had none. He didn't complete a pass for the last 3 quarters of their biggest win of the season. And then their other wins were versus Tommy DeVito, Zach Wilson, Easton Stick, and Jarrett Stidham.
Yep.
Which good on them for beating up on those defenses. But I think this offense is going to be bad just because it's like the most bleak quarterback situation in the NFL with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. They have a nice little offensive weaponry, but I don't like the hiring of Luke Getsy as an offensive coordinator. That doesn't inspire any confidence into me. And they're simply just going to be a heavy run offense and try to win games with that in their defense. And that's just not a way to win consistently in the NFL, and not with the talent that they have on this roster.
Yeah, a heavy run offense with no plan for being explosive. Yeah, there's Devontae Adams, but you have, not good quarterback play. I don't think you have a great offensive line, right? You're going to have a rookie guard. Brock Bowers is a fun player that you drafted in the first round, but I would have preferred them going after a corner. Like, I would have preferred like a Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold.
This team desperately needs a corner, and they lost guys.
Yeah, they did.
They lost Amik Robertson and Marcus Peters, and we'll talk about it. But let's start with the offense like we do. And we just got to start with the quarterback conversation, right? Like, first, like, who do you think is going to start at quarterback for them, or who should start at quarterback for them?
Gardner Minshew should start, but the fact that Gardner Minshew last year with the Colts kept them afloat, but like, you look back to that game on national television where Colts win the game and Gardner Minshew is a halfway decent quarterback and makes some throws that he needs to make. The Colts are in the playoffs and the Texans are not. But I think that was the kind of summary of Gardner Minshew with the Colts. Is he had really good coaching, he had a really good offensive line, he had a good offense kind of around him, and it wasn't good enough he wasn't good enough in the moments that he needed to be even okay in.
And even with Aiden O'Connell, like, they had a good offensive line last year. They have a really good, receiver duo. And like, Aiden O'Connell was 31st in deep throw rate. Gardner Minshew was 27th. And we're talking about teams with good offensive lines and weapons to do that, right? And it wasn't like they were super efficient when they did do it, right? O'Connell was 26th. Gardner Minshew was 19th in efficiency. They were 17th and 20th in average depth of target, and both struggled to avoid pressure and neither face much, right? Like, you have Gardner Minshew who is reckless when he's under pressure, and O'Connell who just gets rid of the ball and checks it down. Like, as for success rate, Minshew was 24th for quarterbacks. O'Connell was 30th of 35. Like, it's just a very bleak quarterback situation for them right now. And I know they have hope in O'Connell and he can improve, but I just don't know how much he can improve. And I don't view their offensive play caller as a positive for them.
No, I hate Luke Getsy joining from the Bears. Now, here's the thing. It's a very Antonio Pierce hire, but it's just a 2024 NFL philosophy that I do not agree with, where the Bears have been one of the more run-heavy teams in the league with the negative pass rate over expected in both of his seasons. Now, I will say, Luke Getsy has designed some nice rushing offenses. And, it's been some good O-line movement, and it's been some good kind of running back play, even with not the best running backs in the world. So, they did have Montgomery there for a little bit, but still. So this is Antonio Pierce, where Antonio Pierce wants to be a smash mouth, old school head coach of we're going to stop the run and we're going to run the ball up front. And a common theme of a lot of these teams that we talk about, Bobby, that are kind of at the bottom of these power rankings is there are teams that kind of want to be that. There are teams that are trying to be that, and they don't do those things that well, especially some of these offenses start at the bottom of these power rankings. They want to run the ball. They have coordinators that try and run the ball, but they don't really do it well. And it just feels like this is going to be an offense of run first down, run second down, throw on third down, and put your quarterback at a disadvantage by throwing on third and long. That's what it feels like this offense is going to be.
And hey, they're a team that should it's going to be interesting to see how Zamir White, their running back, plays, right?
I have stats on that.
They let Josh Jacobs walk, and they're going to hand the keys to Zamir White, who they really, really like him, right? He started the last 4 games of the year, had 397 yards on 84 attempts. His yards per game was 99. That would rank first in the NFL. His yards per carry would rank 9th. They really, really like him. And their offensive line, Colton Miller's their anchor. They lost Jermaine Eleanor. Thyre Munford's going to go to right tackle. Greg Van Roten's gone. Jackson Powers Johnson in, the second rounder out of Oregon. But I struggle to see a way that this offense could be top 24.
Yeah, I mean, this is their path to success, man. I mentioned that Luke Getsy, at least that he's called a decent run offense in Chicago the last couple years. They were
also
7th in the NFL.
Quarterback that rushes for a lot of yards in Justin Fields too.
Right. They were 7th in the NFL in EPA per rush on early downs from 2022 to 2023. So that's the positive thing with Luke Getsy. And they are high on Zamir White. Antonio Pierce and Luke Getsy have raved about him this spring. Zamir White in the 4 games that Josh Jacobs missed at the end of 2023, 24.3 opportunities per game, 114.3 yards per game. This is total opportunities and touches. Hit Antonio Pierce's magic number of 20 plus in each outing. And this is from a Raiders page. So apparently Antonio Pierce has talked about he wants his running backs getting 20 touches a game. 13th in explosive run rate, and 6th in yards after contact per attempt. So, hey, if you want to talk about, you mentioned that Demario Douglas is maybe a fantasy football sleeper. I may be targeting Zamir White in some of my drafts in that 10th, 11th round, right? Because it may not be that efficient because the Raiders offense may not be that efficient, but he's going to get a shit ton of touches in, Alexander Mattison's their backup running back, and he's not very good at all. So I'm kind of in on Zamir White from a volume standpoint this year. He's going to get a shit ton of touches.
Yeah, they're going to really try and work it for him. But so it'll be interesting to see what this passing game even looks like, right? They have a nice weaponry around whoever will be that quarterback. I think they're going to force feed Devontae Adams, who had, another 100-catch, 1,100-yard season last year, but you saw his yards per catch go down quite a bit. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the game. And I think Jacoby Myers continues to be one of the most underrated guys, right? I couldn't believe the Pats, let him walk and then sign Juju Smith-Schuster for the same exact contract. That was couldn't believe they did that. I think they're going to be a team with the running identity that is going to try and run a lot of 12 personnel. They're going to make Michael Mayer the Y tight end, right? You should, hopefully you can see a year or two jump with him. And then you kind of think Brock Bowers is your pseudo slot wide receiver, right? That's the scouting report on him anyways. But it seems like he's going to be he's going to line up, flexed out 65% of the time and inline 35%.
He can put his hand in the dirt, though, right? I mean, I know he's probably not a great. Tell me about him as a blocker a little bit.
I mean, you like his blocking film, but with his size, he's not someone that you're going to feel confident going up against NFL defensive ends consistently.
They also
right?
have Harrison Bryant. So they have the potential to run 12 and 13.
I think it's going to be 12 because you don't want to take Myers off the field. Like, he's really good. You can throw Trey Tucker in there to give you a big play here or there, but Brock Bowers is kind of like a power slot wide receiver. Like, that's what he is. So I think they're going to run a lot of pseudo 12 personnel, but a lot of it is going to be with Brock Bowers split out and Michael Mayer in line.
I have a Devontae Adams question. So 2024, his cap hit is $25 million. I want to stay pre-June 1st. Obviously, he's not getting cut this year. But 2025, he has a cap hit of $44.1 million, cap savings of $28 million, and then dead money of $15.7 million. Why I'm going into even next year is Devontae Adams a trade candidate this year for the Las Vegas Raiders? Would anybody take on that contract?
Yeah, I absolutely think it'd be hard to make it work because, like you said, that those big numbers. But if there's it just makes it. But at the same time, if you're the Raiders, you're doing your quarterback really, really dirty if you get rid of whoever's under center with them. You're doing them really dirty if you take Devon. Like, we're talking about how we don't feel good about this offense at all. You're doing them really dirty if you take Devontae Adams out of the equation.
They got Michael Gallup.
Like I said, I like Gallup, but you're doing him really, really dirty if you take Devontae Adams out of the equation. And I don't know, Devontae Adams, is he going to put up a stink? Which I don't see that happening from him. And is Antonio Pierce going to do that? I don't know. So that's where this offense is such a weird spot where it's they have some good players. Their offensive line should be all right. And, they're going to lean to the run, but it's just it is a bleak situation for them at quarterback.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have anything else on their offense? Because the defense is the fun part of the Raiders.
No, it's the very fun part. I think this is going to be a bottom 3 offensive situation this year.
Yeah. So the defense. You have Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, and Malcolm Kuntz, right? Those are the players up front. And Patrick Graham is defensive coordinator. We've always loved Patrick Graham, and I think he's starting to get his flowers, right? Had the 9th ranked scoring defense with the 2nd lowest defensive payroll in the NFL last year, and that included Chandler Jones on that payroll, who didn't play for them. Everything starts with being structured the correct way, right? They're going to play sound. All 11 guys are going to play sound run defense, and he comes from the Patriots school of thought of, we want to take away what you do best, right? So if it's running the ball, we're going to figure out how you like to run the ball and stop it. If you're a great quarterback, we're going to take away your number one weapon, right? And we're going to make you go to the other guys and get you out of there. So he is great at doing that, right? And that's why you saw them overachieve, right? And then you have the simulated pressures where you confuse the quarterback up front and confuse the offensive lineman, and then you get free runners. And then you give him a guy like Max Crosby, who was 4th last year in total sacks, hits, and pressures, only the Parsons, Hutchinson, and Nick Bosa. Add Christian Wilkins next to him, who's a great two-way player. Malcolm Kuntz is a good pass rusher. He can do some stuff with a secondary that is very worrisome. He can do some stuff to really make it easier on those guys in the back ends.
I do think there was a little bit of an Antonio Pierce influence in some way. They finished 9th in defensive EPA per play total, all season, 11th in EPA per dropback, and 8th in EPA per rush. But Antonio Pierce was the head coach weeks 9 through 18. As a defense through that span, they were 2nd in EPA per play, 7th in pass, and then the 1st in run. Now, you mentioned the quarterbacks that they played and the teams that they played, but there was an insane game against the Chiefs in there too. So that's really, really good. And overall, Patrick Graham is still being Patrick Graham. And I love looking at the advanced numbers of Patrick Graham at times, where he had the 4th lowest blitz rate in the league, 12th highest sack rate, 23rd in QB hits. Now, here's the thing. Patrick Graham's defense, the Achilles heel a little bit, has always been 3rd down. They were 26th in EPA weeks 9 through 18 on 3rd down EPA, which does match the Patrick Graham experience, having a little bit of trouble getting off the field. Raiders having that game-changing rusher outside of Crosby, iffy secondary. So all of these things are going to feed into the issues that the Raiders defense that they had last year, and maybe that they could have. But man, there clearly was something that they were doing weeks 9 through 18 that they were the legit numbers wise, they were the second best defense in football last year.
Yeah, it was unbelievable what Patrick Graham did with that unit. Like, he got them to overachieve, right? Max Crosby was their one just stud player, and he got everyone else like to get the best version out of themselves. And so that you add Christian Wilkins to that, like that's a nice piece. And he allows those guys to control things up front, right? Like, you have Robert Spillane, who's like a good linebacker to stop the run and gives you some pass rush value, in Diablo, but like those guys aren't like getting downhill and making a bunch of plays in the backfield, right? Like, those guys combined had only 11 tackles for a loss. Like, they rely on their front to create negatives. And I think Spillane's not that great in coverage, and that's where they had guys step up in the secondary last year. But you lost guys, right? You lost Amik Robertson, you lost Marcus Peters, and this has never been Patrick Graham's defense with the Raiders has never been a team that create turnovers. They have 25 interceptions in the last 3 seasons combined. His first 2 years was bottom of the NFL. Look at this secondary and tell me you're comfortable. Like, Marcus Epps is their guy at safety, right? That's Patrick Graham's guy. He gets everybody in place and doing the right thing. But you have Jack Jones, who was like good for them after the Patriots released him for being a shithead, essentially, after getting arrested and missing curfew and a bunch of other stuff. And then Nate Hobbs as their nickel corner is fine. And then who's going to be that other guy? Jacorian Bennett, DeCamerion Richardson. Like, they just feel like a team that can get abused in the secondary.
Yep.
And here's the thing. We're talking about this in the context of the entire Raiders team. I think this Raiders defense is going to be decent. I think it's going to be one of the top 50, at minimum one of the top 15 defenses in the NFL, and the potential to be top 10.
They're going to stop the run.
Yeah, they're going to be a good defense. The issue is I don't know if they can overachieve to the point to where they can make up for the offensive side of the football.
Correct.
Right?
They're going to be on the field a ton. And here's the thing with Patrick Graham's defense. You have the personnel to stop the run. So that's great on early downs, right? They have the Patrick Graham's defense is going to limit and stop the big play too. Like, we know this as Giants fans, and then even the data going back with the Raiders the last couple years too. They're going to stop the big play, but they're not going to be able to get off the field, where teams are going to chip away. They're going to sustain drives, and I think the Raiders are going to do a great job of, instead of allowing touchdowns, they're going to allow field goals, and you're going to be able to stay in a game that way. But when the offense is going to go 3 and out, or the offense, your offense isn't going to be able to sustain drives themselves, you're going to be on the field a ton, and that's going to tire your unit out, and you're going to get worn down. And I think that's just going to be the reality for this Raiders defense this year.
Yeah, if we were talking about this defense with an offense that we thought was going to be like dead middle of the pack, like an offense we were predicting to be the 16th best offense, we are talking about a team that could match 8 wins, 9 wins. But it's just offensively, it's so bleak that I don't think this defense has the talent to make this team overachieve, to the point of having success, right? This defense will overachieve with the talent that they have. And the other thing is they have no depth, right? Like, tell me one position on defense where you feel good about their depth.
Honestly, like, Tyree Wilson is a huge part of that.
Yeah, here's what happens with Tyree Wilson. He was awful last year.
If they have Tyree Wilson as your third option, kind of coming off the bench there with Max Crosby,
but that's
and
based
Malcolm
off
Kuntz.
of hope, because he was drafted in the first round. Which, hey, he may do it, right? He's an extremely talented guy. But if you didn't see where that guy was drafted and you saw what he did last year, you would be talking about a bad player.
Really, it's their front. It's their front where John Jenkins and Christian Wilkins are awesome, and then you have Adam Butler, who gives. I think he gives like legit juice as a pass rusher, and then John Jenkins is going to be that guy.
Malcolm Kuntz is a good player too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he's more of he's like a defensive end. He's lining up on the outside. Byron Young is a third rounder from 2023 from Alabama that I liked. So they could have depth there, but outside of that, I don't know much about their interior guys. I love Spillane. I love the way that he plays, but the secondary, no, like nothing.
So their new additions: Gardner Minshew, Alexander Madison, Michael Gallup, Jalen Guyton, Christian Wilkins. They lost Jimmy Garoppolo, Josh Jacobs, Jakob Johnson, Hunter Renfrow, Austin Hooper, Jermaine Elmanor, Greg Van Roten, Jerry Tillery, Bilal Nichols, Amik Robertson, and Marcus Peters. I mean, the best player on there is in the addition category with Christian Wilkins, but then you go through it and it's all the losses. Josh Jacobs. Yep. I've never been the biggest Josh Jacobs fan, even when he's had his best seasons. Hunter Renfrow kind of just disappeared from the offense. Jermaine Elmanor been a good player for them. Van Roten performed well, and then Amik Robertson and Marcus Peters aren't the best guys in the world, but they're they did play fairly well for them last year. Also, here's another thing: is I don't know how much juice their draft class brings. Right, you have Brock Bowers in the first round. We'll see how that he's an electric player, A+ type of
but
player.
What do you think about that process though for them of drafting him?
I would have went Kenyon Mitchell.
Or even Terry Arnold if they liked. I would have went either corner if they had whatever corner ranked higher.
But if 100%. Let's say those two guys were off the board, let me ask you this, because I would have went Kenyon Mitchell. No, not even thought twice about it. Let's say both those corners are off the board. What do you think about drafting Brock Bowers now?
Especially when they just drafted
Michael Mayer
in the second round of the previous year's draft. I don't like the process of drafting a tight end in the first round. I really don't.
Especially with a team that just has all these holes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they draft Jackson Powers-Johnson second round, like that pick, and then the rest don't inspire a lot of confidence in me. Right, DeMar Glaze, I don't think he's going to work out a tackle. DeCamerion Richardson, I'm not familiar with him, so I won't say anything there. Tommy Eichenberg, he can be a halfway decent linebacker. Dylan Love's a good receiving back, but how much is he ever going to get on the field? And then Trey Taylor and MJ Devonshire in the 7th round. It's not a draft class that you look at like, man, that can come in there and impact day one, and it's not one that you can see that's going to do wonders down the road, right? Like Brock Bowers can be really awesome. Jackson Powers-Johnson, I think, is going to be a good guard or center if he ends up moving back there. And then after that, it just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence.
And
I like Trey Taylor, the safety, but the 7th round pick.
Forget for a second that some of the offensive players that went after Brock Bowers, but I'm also sitting here looking at all the defensive players. There wasn't a defensive player taken until pick 15. The Raiders could have had their pick of the litter for their defensive players. So that includes Latu, who I didn't fully love, Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Byron Murphy. I'm sorry, with the new Raiders GM here, Tom Telesco, who I just don't know the plans that they have for Tyree Wilson. But if you want to talk about making a strength to strength, John Jenkins he's a run-of-the-mill guy. He's been on like 5-6 teams in his NFL career. He spends 1 or 2 years here, and then he goes to another team. Adam Butler is a guy that can kind of, like I said, give you juice coming off the bench, but I don't know. This is a fearsome. If you add a top edge rusher from this year's draft across from Max Crosby and then Christian Wilkins, or even add Byron Murphy, and then you have the trio of Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, Byron Murphy, and then you have Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Wilson as like the guys off the bench on the edge. Holy shit, that changes like, oh my God, this in terms of starting a rebuild. Antonio Pierce is a new head coach. You have a new GM coming in here who, by the way, Telesco's draft record with the Chargers has not been great outside of the first round. Like he has and even the first round isn't even that great. It doesn't have like any really significant players in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds that you can say that he's been the GM for the Chargers for quite a while. That would have oh my God, I would have been sitting here saying, you know what? I don't know what the Raiders are going to be, but holy shit, I love that front. I still love their front, and I love adding Christian Wilkins, and Max Crosby is fucking awesome, but they had such a potential to make that that's already an elite unit.
Yeah, Kenyon Mitchell should have been the pick.
Yeah, I agree.
Or you
I
go
agree.
Patrick.
But even if they
I even think double dipping at offensive line would have been better. They went Jackson Powers-Johnson. Why couldn't have this team went and got Fuaga and Jackson Powers-Johnson? Too. Right? Like I do think there's better options there for Brock. And then we're not talking about a team that doesn't have any future at tight end. They do have Michael Mayer. So I agree with you. Who's your X factor for this Las Vegas Raiders?
Yeah, it's Zamir White, without a doubt. The potential of the explosive runs that he did have last year, the volume that he's going to get. If he could be a guy that breaks tackles and Greg Jennings put the team on my back, the Raiders offense has a chance to be not great, but it has a chance to sustain itself and give the Raiders a shot at winning football games. And if Antonio Pierce wants to play this smash mouth football, Zamir White is going to have the opportunity to get a lot of touches this year. And it's up to him, and it's kind of up to this offensive line if he could be efficient with it and how much this Raiders offense can, float above water.
Mine is Jack Jones, the corner who, like I told you before, they claimed for the Patriots midseason. He came in and played well for them right away. Keep his head on straight, and he can improve as a player too. Like, he's a very young player, has a lot of promise. And if you can feel good about one of the corner spots, like really good, not just like, okay, Nate Hobbs is all right, but you feel really good about that, I think that can do wonders for the defense. Over under is at 6.5 wins. Are you going over or under?
I'm going under.
I'm going under as well too. I think this is a team that's offensively, it's in trouble. It's just I really think this offense is in trouble, and I hate to like throw water on this Antonio Pierce flame, but I like Antonio Pierce, but like you said, the roster doesn't feel good offensively. The quarterback is going to be a huge issue, and I don't think they have an offensive coordinator who's going to be someone who makes up for the flaws of the quarterback. Like, I think like you said, they're going to try and smash mouth, and maybe they smash mouth their way into 7 wins. But I just don't see this as a team where we're looking at as anything more than a middle, a team that ends up being 2-3 games out of the wild card.
Crazy that they won 8 games last year.
I don't know how they did it, right? So that's the rebuttal to us. Like, well, they did it last year, but it's like, yeah, but you're probably not going to be facing Easton Stick when you play the Chargers this time around. You're, not going to be placing, Jared. Like, they had 4 of their 5 wins were against lower than ranked 30th quarterbacks.
They also lost the game 3-0 last year.
Yeah, they lost the game 3-0 last year. It's insane. Like, how frustrating. I'd want to kill the offense. Again, they beat Patrick Mahomes, right? Which is crazy that they beat the greatest quarterback of this era, and their only other wins were against Tommy DeVito, Zach Wilson, Jared Stidham, and Easton Stick. All guys who should have to battle just to be a backup in the NFL.
Imagine being talking Raiders. And
like 3 of those guys are third stringers, and the other one is battling with the other third stringer with Stidham and Zach Wilson.
Imagine being talking Raiders after a Week 14 matchup, having to talk about a 3-0 loss.
No, I don't want to imagine that. All right, that is the Las Vegas Raiders, and this is Football Today.